Good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to the Lepanto Institute's Anchor Team. I'm your host, Michael Hitchborn, and again, with me is the lovely Alyssa.
But who knows for how long?
But for how long? Yes. Well, at least until May. We can say at least until May. And then, who knows? You'll be on hiatus for a little while with the baby and everything else, but I'm sure you'll show up and be happy to show the baby to everybody.
But we're not meeting next Thursday.
No. Quick note, we are not meeting next Thursday. It's Holy Thursday. And Lepanto Institute Anchor Team has never met on Holy Thursday, and it's or on Good Friday, because usually prior to last year, I think the show was on Friday nights. Well, anyway, so we've got a really packed program for you this evening. We're going to be talking primarily about rainbow issues. So,
oh yes, expect euphemisms.
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping we don't get put in YouTube jail.
Yes, we don't want to get another strike. So we're going to be using euphemisms in order to try and avoid certain things that are going to get us kicked off. So before we get into the program, why don't we go ahead and start with our prayer? In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Our Lady of Victory,
pray for us.
In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. My mother says, wait a minute, please pray for my cousin's husband, Mike, who was in a motorcycle. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we'll say an extra Hail Mary at the end of the program for Mike, who is also my cousin. So, or by marriage anyway. So anyway, yes, definitely prayers for Mike. Okay, so first and foremost, one of the things that I want to do here is share my screen. Present and share screen and go to not a tab. It'll be okay, not there. Okay, I'm going to let you talk for a second while I figure out how to share slides.
So when we were discussing what to choose as the topic for the week, of course, the Monday school shooting in Nashville came up, and that led us to sort of start looking at, well, what other ways are people becoming radicalized who identify, with the dysphoric rainbow movement.
Yes, dysphoric rainbow movement.
So obviously there have been several shooting incidents over the last few years that have involved people of the dysphoric rainbow movement. And it's interesting that with this most recent one on Monday, that the major news outlets have already come out swinging with, no, this is all garbage, that you can't say there's a trend.
Oh, no trend. Okay.
No trend. In fact, if we look at the past 5 years of shootings, that these people account for such a, less than 0.5% or whatever. It's like, well, first of all, that movement wasn't that much of a thing 5 years ago.
Right.
Secondly, there's enough of a trend to say that this should be something concerning. At the least, to say, I don't know, law enforcement, FBI, profilers.
Right.
Clearly there's some kind of trend.
Well,
even if it's recent.
Let's remember, Catholics, traditional Latin Mass Catholics, anybody who likes to, have large families, they're the ones that the FBI needs to keep tabs on. Pro-lifers, that's right. But these people, these alphabet soup people, we can't monitor everybody. Come on.
Well, more like we just refuse to monitor them. I mean, it's kind of like, again, the hypocrisy of all the people who protested outside the Supreme Court justices' homes, which was a clear act of intimidation directed toward the justices in regard to the Dobbs decision.
Yep.
There was the guy who was arrested for trying to kill one of them.
Right.
All of that. And all Merrick Garland can say is, well, I mean, we didn't really do anything because that's the U.S. Marshals and they didn't choose to act, so it's not our fault.
Right.
And meanwhile, the Marshals were like, actually, you told us not to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You told us to stand down.
But Merrick Garland is so incensed that they would impugn his character and say that he would willfully, withdraw support from Supreme Court justices and from individuals who are fighting for pro-life causes and that kind of thing.
Right. Meanwhile, Mark Houck's a big baddie.
Mm-hmm. He needs to be raided.
He needs to be raided and arrested at gunpoint,
mm-hmm.
even though his only crime was to push somebody, a crime that not even the local police were willing to prosecute him for. But no, we shouldn't be profiling people
mm-hmm.
based on actual acts of violence, just what we think they will be violent.
So with regard to the idea of violence coming from these alphabet soup rainbow corners of the globe, I want to show you a few things. I've been spending the last couple of days scouring social media, looking for examples. And I have to tell you, there is a particular day of vengeance that you've probably heard of. It's supposed to take place on April 1st, April Fool's Day.
Not a coincidence.
Not a coincidence, no. This particular day, and here we go, of course, from pride to vengeance, which is kind of an interesting dichotomy of things. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And what you're going to see is that these people have been extremely vociferous about what they intend to do and what their ideology is and who they're targeting. And the interesting thing about it is that and I had my thought and I'm trying to remember it. It had something to do. I posted a couple of these images on Twitter.
Oh, yes.
And Twitter removed, well, it what do you call it? It suspended my account for a day. And then
Elon Musk didn't like your post.
Well, there's an explanation, and I'm not sure I buy it, but it's at least acceptable. And we'll get into that too. So here's some of the stuff that we found. Right here is let me see if I can make this bigger. No, it's not going to get bigger. So I'll just
hopefully you all can see.
Yep. Hopefully you all can see. There. So here is this person, Carolina Buchek, she's a reporter. She lives out in Kentucky or Tennessee. And she was talking about this particular House bill that was meeting. I think this is Kentucky. And she was talking about House Bill 470 and how there were these transgender people and rainbow people that were out there protesting. But what caught my attention is this particular sign. Trans people are not a threat. That was particularly interesting to me because this was, you'll notice the date, March 2nd. These people are not a threat. However, it was specifically one of theirs that took out a school, took out three children, took out 3 adults. And, we're not supposed to be taking them as a threat. Well, here's another one.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Here we have 4 individuals, 3 of whom are female to male. Okay. Which is a very strange thing to be going on here because usually
women account for a very small percentage of
mass acts of violence.
Shootings. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've got the statistic somewhere in here, but they're very small.
Yeah, very small. So, but here in this is just within the last year. Okay. These are individuals from within the last year, and these are female to male. acts of violence. And Lisa Evers makes a great point. She says roid rage. Well, maybe not necessarily steroids, but testosterone.
Yeah.
It has to do with these hormone therapies. And I do wonder if
it is unclear
uh-huh.
whether, because obviously no one would want to highlight this in the media.
Yeah.
It's unclear whether these ladies were taking said
hormones. Right.
But that certainly would account for some of the aggression if they were.
Right.
Detransitioners, women who have
detransition
have said that it makes definitely it's made them angry and more aggressive to take testosterone.
Yeah. So this is the particular image that got me kicked off of Twitter for a day. It says, day of violence, stop genocide. And then it has April 1st at 11 a.m. and they're assembling at the Supreme Court. And of course, they're saying, wear a mask. Now, if this is supposed to be a peaceful protest, why are they wearing masks?
Isn't it a day of visibility?
I thought it was, yes, it's a day of visibility, but they're wearing a mask.
But they need more than visibility.
Yes, they need invisibility because they don't want to be identified when they are engaged in their acts of vengeance. Well, so Mary Porter says April 1. Here's the thing. This particular day of visibility is March 31st. That's tomorrow. And that's been a thing for, I think, the last 3 or 4 years. And the only reason I know about it is because of my research with regard to the CCHD. We've been watching and tracking grantees that have been participating and celebrating this particular day for quite some time. So they have this day of visibility, and this particular organization, TRAN is the organization that does it or is promoting it. And we'll get into them in a little bit too. But this organization is calling for a second day. And this second day has to do with vengeance.
That's the April 1st.
Right. Now, before I continue, what I want to point out is the Twitter article. The headline is Twitter removes tweets about Day of Vengeance. And what they said was interesting. So Ella Irwin, who is Twitter's head of trust and safety, said, we do not support tweets that incite violence irrespective of who posts them. Vengeance does not imply peaceful protest, which is exactly what we've been saying. Organizing or support of peaceful protests is okay. So what Twitter is saying is that they took down those things because what they were doing were inciting violence. And they're right.
But further down it said they removed it off conservatives' posts too. Conservatives who said they were just reposting that to draw attention to it. So that's probably why you got shut down. That's
exactly why I got shut down.
Elon still likes you.
Elon still likes me. Yes. He's still, Elon is my friend.
He just doesn't want you involved with the vengeance crowd.
Yeah. So female Casey Royals fan says Michael Knowles had his account suspended for a day because he quoted the Bible about vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So it was the key word.
Gotta find euphemism.
Right. Yep. So yeah, so this is kind of an interesting thing. This is another piece of a tweet that was put out. Says nobody is coming to save us. Siblings, pick up your weapons. And if you look at the image carefully, it's a sketched image of a soldier holding what looks like an assault rifle, wearing camo pants, which is very similar to what the individual that went to that Christian school was wearing. Here's something else. This is another one of the Day of Vengeance things that were posted. And
you said the word.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I didn't say the one preceding day.
Oh, okay.
And it says every day is this day. And of course, what do you see in her hand? A knife. So prior to this, you have somebody in an assault weapon, carrying an assault weapon, says, pick up your weapons. And then in the next one, you've got somebody holding a knife. These people are not talking euphemistically. And for them to make a statement, well, we're not about violence, is just absolutely disingenuous.
Well, I do think that there's clearly somebody inciting them to be angry at, quote unquote, normal people.
Uh-huh.
In other words, the people who seem to be at peace, conducting their lives in a way that,
Mm-hmm.
they're not unhappy.
Right.
There's this incitement to look at them and say they're somehow oppressing us just by their normalcy.
Right.
Because they're not unhappy like we are, like this individual.
So I'm going to share with you this. Now, before I share this particular, okay, let me pull that one. I'm going to share something else. Before I share this particular image, it's also got audio. I just want to give you a warning. This is disturbing. Okay. This creature is about to sing for you, and what they sing is very disturbing. It's very upsetting. If you don't want to hear it, you can mute for just a few seconds. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, but it's awful. It's awful, and it's pretty clear that this person is diabolically involved. I'll say that much. So you've been forewarned. If you don't want to hear it, just turn off your volume for the next few seconds. I'll give a thumbs up when I indicate that we're done, and then you can turn your volume back on. So here we go. I'm playing it in 3, 2, 1.
You want my future? I'm gonna get you fast. If you wanna get with me, I'll turn your face into a mask. I won't be wasting this precious time. I'll get you in the dark and then commit this crime. I'll tell you what I really, really want. I want your soul. That's right, I want your soul.
Okay. We're done. So if you want to turn your audio back on, you're safe. That's horrifying. That's absolutely horrifying. And it gets worse. I mean, I didn't want to play the whole thing for you, but this individual was talking about committing horrific acts, cutting off people's faces, and committing a crime. It actually says to commit this crime, and then I want your soul, which is to, I want to run you through with the thing that they've got in their hand. So, and again,
was that tweet removed for violence or?
No, it's still up there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's still up there. But I guess they didn't use the word, the word that shall not be mentioned. They didn't use the magic word. So here we have another situation. I can, and I probably will, but I like having these examples because it's important for us to know how dangerous these people are. They're deadly. And I think a lot of people just don't, for a long time, they've looked at this movement as kind of harmless. They're not.
Or as a self-harm movement,
right?
At most,
right?
But not harmful to others.
Right. But they're not. This is a very dangerous movement. There are a few other things I want to share with you. So I'm going to remove that creature.
Creepy guy.
Yeah, remove
or
that
whatever
thing.
It is.
Yep. Let me stop that screen. Okay. And we'll go back to our outline here. Oh, one of the things, this is another thing I wanted to share with you. Put it in English. This comes from I think it was a Hungarian website where they actually did a little bit of a investigation. I'll share my screen with you here so you can see what I'm looking at. The headline is Group Behind Day of Vengeance raised money for a certain kind of training. And you can see on the screen right there what kind of training we're talking about. These people are not just advocating violence. They're not just inciting violence, But now we're learning that they actually are training individuals in committing acts of violence. This, again, this is not to be taken lightly. This is not something that we should just sit down and say, oh, well, I guess the police will have to clean up this kind of thing. No, these people are in league with Antifa. They are radicalized.
And who are they taking vengeance against specifically anyway?
Who do they think they're taking vengeance against?
Yeah, like who are the organizers? Like who's the big baddie?
Well, so there really isn't a face behind the organization, which is also disturbing, because you have these faceless agencies that are going around inciting violence, probably with Soros money or something along those lines, and it's all a part of a revolutionary movement. And when you start looking into the other tweets and things that are supporting this kind of stuff, these people talk about revolution just regularly. They're talking about how they're going to overthrow this and overturn that, and it's revolution, and now they're advocating violence and they're promoting this violent revolution. And at the top of the article, they say that this particular protest day is taking place despite the fact that
of the Mondays
of Monday's events. Okay, there you.
Yeah, can you imagine like a Trump rally?
Right.
That had to do something with
if there was a MAGA hatted person.
Yes, a MAGA hatted person who had committed acts of atrocious acts, and then the Trump rally to incite people to, take back things was still going to follow days later.
Right.
People would be losing their minds.
Yep. They'd be losing their minds. They'd be out of their heads.
All the mainstream media would talk about how sick that was and how all the problems with Trump supporters. See, here it is right here.
Yeah.
They don't care anything about those poor victims.
Right.
All they care about is, their movement. Well, we're here to say that to you too.
Yeah, exactly. And it says right here that, that event took place on Monday, and they listed the victims. And they said, but despite the political tensions rising across the country, which saw a press secretary for Arizona governor post a tweet about doing something to these people, this organization called Trans Radical Activist Network, TRAN, is pushing forward with their protest. So back to...
So it's okay for Jane Fonda to joke about, getting rid of pro-lifers. It's okay for people to call for, there was the English professor at one of the universities. He's been suspended for now, but he publicly posted that he was like, oh yeah, I think people who are, bigoted, transphobic, whatever, that they should be killed.
Yep.
He's like, it's better than shouting them down.
Oh, better than shouting them down. So in other words, get out of my way, one way or the other. If you're standing or lying on a slab.
Right.
I want to show some more of these things. So this is Minnesota's lieutenant governor. Okay. So again, these aren't just fringe people that are doing this now. You've got people prominent in politics. You just mentioned, or I just mentioned the press secretary for the governor of Arizona. You mentioned the professor. What was it?
He was just was at a college, maybe in, Wyoming, something like that. He was an English professor, and the school did suspend him.
Sure.
With pay while they investigate. But the point is, like, anybody else making public comments like that, just even a few years ago, they would have been fired.
Right.
The police would have been called in or notified or whatever, all of that. Now it's like, oh, no. Jane Fonda was just joking. And, this is all just, hyperbole, right? It's theater.
Theater. Yeah. This isn't theater. They're talking about protecting certain kids with a Bowie weapon, this one. Okay. Jocelyn Berry. Jocelyn Berry, I can't remember what position this person holds. Maybe she's a journalist. She might be a journalist. I don't remember. But when we see those kinds of phobes, And this was an animated GIF file, which means it was in motion. And you just see this person carrying 2 pistols walking through a room. And it's
and of course, we know they define those sorts of phobes as anybody who just happens to disagree with them.
Right.
We're not talking about people showing up to, like, beat up these poor, misunderstood, marginalized individuals. We're talking about anybody who just is like, yeah, I don't think this is good. And I don't think you should be pumping kids specifically full of these things, or cutting their parts off, or any of that. That makes you phobic.
Giving them little books in grade school that are graphic in detail, showing, all sorts of nasty bedroom type behavior, or teaching them about the drag queens on the bus going swish, swish, swish.
Right. But anything that is anything less than full capitulation is labeled as phobic. So it's like, you're telling people, I mean, by their own admission, the movement is characterized by people who have mental illness. Their own admission, they say that.
Right.
So you're telling people with mental illness that they need to go out and get vengeance. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Here you've got these kinds of rights, or else, or else. And what is the or else? Oh, they're indicating exactly what kind of or else. This, of course, there are some that have speculated that this may have been the perpetrator from Monday's event, but it's unclear if that is in case.
Well, that's why they wear masks.
The case. Yeah, that's why they wear masks. Here's another one. This person's wearing the same shirt. This is not the person from Monday, but same exact message. And what are they holding? Interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this because we don't need that anymore. But here now we have several instances of these incitings to violence. And they are specifically targeting certain groups. They're trying to get people to, I don't know, to knuckle under the threat of violence. And then I don't know exactly how they intend to do this, but I do know that Matt Walsh, just this weekend, he was supposed to go give a talk and he had to cancel it because of threats against his family coming from this particular crowd. So it's, and he has now hired armed security. He has an armed security detail at his house because of these threats, and they're real threats,
Absolutely. But of course, just in time for, all of this, where conservatives are rightly pointing out, hey, there's a trend here. You're not just about like, let us coexist or let us exist, but you actually want to dominate and force people, like, there's anger, hatred here. Already, mainstream media has been, trotting out the, no, you're wrong. There's no trend. Look at all these statistics.
Right.
You're wrong. You're wrong. I mean, Washington Post, who else? I think it was Reuters and Newsweek. They all immediately were like, this is not a trend. Not a trend.
Well, to quote,
but Matt Walsh has to, hire private security for the not a trend.
Yeah. And the Supreme Court justices have to hire private security for not a trend.
For not a trend, right? Even though they're government officials who should have the U.S. Marshals and the DOJ as their backup, like
right. And they don't, because gosh, it's not a threat. It's not a real threat.
It's not a trend.
People are just exercising their First Amendment rights.
Yes.
To quote Forrest Gump, I'm not a smart man, Jenny, but I do understand propaganda when I see it.
Well, and it'd be sad too, like, because a lot of these people, like the ones that, what was it, the Denver one, that the girl Alec McKinney, and when she was sentenced in court, she said, I don't want a lighter sentence, because she was 17, they give her 40 years. She's like, I don't want a lighter sentence. She apologized. She was sobbing, again, the point is, like, they're clearly in some cases being manipulated, maybe in all cases.
I think they are. Absolutely. Absolutely. They're being manipulated by doctors. They're being manipulated by politicians. They're
By
being
drugs they take.
yes, absolutely. They're being manipulated by special interest groups, and you have to wonder why. What exactly is the end game? And I think it's clear. The end game is revolution.
Yes, I think they are the useful idiots of Marx's revolutionary ideas.
Right.
They're going to use them to destabilize things.
Yep.
And, make a big mess, smash things up, and then they'll just ditch them or turn on them when they're no longer serve a purpose.
Exactly. I was talking to our eldest daughter the other day, and I was because we were talking about this very specific issue and the terrible things that were going on. And I said, look, what you've got to understand about Marxism. A lot of people mistakenly say that, oh, Marxism's this economic system, and Karl Marx was advocating for the underprivileged. What they don't realize is that Marxism has nothing to do with economics. Absolutely nothing. The manifesto used economics in order to propagate an ideology, but the ideology had nothing to do with economics, had nothing to do with grabbing power. The whole thing has nothing to do with power. It has everything to do with creating a system of regular revolution. Ongoing, never-ending revolution. So violence compiled upon violence. If you want to understand exactly what Marxism is, look at the symbol of the amphiss band. If you've never heard of an amphiss band, you can look it up, AMPHISBAND. It's a serpent swallowing its own tail. And the idea of revolution is that idea of the serpent swallowing its tail. The teeth on a serpent are they're backwards. They grab backwards so that the thing that they're holding onto can't escape their mouth. So when they grab their own tail, they're constantly grabbing and they can't let go. And that's what happens with revolution. And if you understand that Marxism is simply about revolution and that the workers are all about, they were just a tool. They were just an instrument for getting there. Right now, it's not so much the workers because, well, American workers are pretty satisfied. Most of the blue collar workers, the guys that are in the factories and whatnot.
There's not many of them left.
There's not what few left there are. But even like the painters that we had come to our house, these guys, blue collar guys, just regular Joes. They don't want all this socialist stuff. So they can't be manipulated as easily. What the ones that are being manipulated, though, are the ones who are part of the sexual revolution. So they had to create something that people wanted that they feel like they're not getting. And that's the anger that they're inciting, which is why they're using words like day of vengeance and day of getting what we want, however you want to put it. But
well, the irony is that they have everything they supposedly want.
Mm-hmm.
You can do whatever you want with whoever you want, whenever you want. There are no laws against it anymore, that sort of thing, or at least not any that are going to ever be enforced. And they're still unhappy.
Yeah. They're
still angry.
Yep.
I mean, I guess that's kind of the point, is if there was a concerted effort to drive people toward this kind of behavior, they understood that sin does not make you happy.
No.
Maybe in the moment, but ultimately you're still left feeling unsatisfied, empty, because your heart is made for God.
Right.
And so without that, you're always trying to search, to fill that God-sized hole in your life. And so now people are saying, well, we need to give that emptiness means you need empowerment.
Yep.
So here's something that'll make you strong, something like, the words that can't be mentioned. It'll make you strong and empowered because you feel empty.
Well, and what winds up happening in effect is you have a system where people have dug themselves into a hole, and instead of tossing them down a rope, these people are throwing them down a new shovel, saying, keep digging, because what you're looking for is down there, not up here. So there are some other things I wanted to show you. Let's see. I've got, oh, yes. Okay. So I'm going to share. Okay.
This isn't the first one of these, by the way.
Oh, I know.
The Kansas City, I think,
Let's see.
State legislature or state capitol was filled with protesters.
So let's how do I stop? Okay, stop screen. There we go.
Well, you're figuring that out. Do you want me to do some of the numbers?
Talk about some of the numbers here, because these are staggering.
So some of the numbers are, this is just in an application to surgeries for the people who are a part of this movement, that in 2021, it was an almost $2 billion industry in the US.
Unbelievable.
To undergo those types of surgeries, either female to male or male to female. And that's expected, that number is expected to grow in the upcoming years. So you can already see why there's a financial incentive for people to provide affirmation.
Right.
And the government's in on the game, as you all know, by providing, like saying, okay, well, sure, let's make Medicaid and other things have to be a part of this care so that these doctors can be reimbursed. So again, there's big money involved in the movement. They expect that the money and the frequency of the surgeries is going to compound at an annual growth rate of 11.23% in the next 8 years.
Wow, that's huge.
So they're saying they think that there's going to be an increasing number of people opting for surgeries because they're going to be identifying as those things. So what I thought was fascinating, these statistics are actually just from a research company. Like, it's not ideologically linked at all. They're just numbers. Was that they said, okay, most of these surgeries were female to male, that accounted for the biggest majority of them, but that they expected in the next year or so that to change from male to female, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd been reading, because I'm working on a new research project. By the way, we have a huge story that we're working on currently that I can't tell you about just yet, but it does have to do with this particular topic. And one of the things that I'm learning is that they have found that most men, even though they'll get the top surgery, are highly, highly resistant to the bottom part surgery. A lot of them, or some of them, go through it, but the vast majority do not. But now they're getting to the point where, as you're pointing out, they're expecting that to reverse. That's crazy to me.
Well, so I think Cedars-Sinai is one of the hospitals that does a lot of these kinds of surgeries. And they said that in 2021, that they had 861 surgeries were performed, wherein 639 were feminization procedures. So that's a large number.
That's a huge number.
Yeah. I mean, that's way more than just like a little over half.
Right.
More like 2/3, know, were feminization procedures. So they didn't specify which. They could just, like you said, be the augmentation stuff.
Right.
But the point is, I actually think this is kind of going into this discussion like we've had about the new misogyny. That this is my own personal opinion, that I think that the reason why the male to female procedures are going to increase is because men, despite the mental illness, they see an opportunity.
Right. Like,
who was named, Woman of the Month or whatever, Woman History Month by Jill Biden? It was a man. Who are competing in women's sports and kicking the girls' butts? It's men. Like, how many female to male athletes are breaking sports records right now? Right. And winning awards? Not many. Not any.
Not any.
So I think that
here's something funny, actually. I saw today that there was a story where this weightlifting bodybuilding coach, I mean, this guy was, his arms were as big around as my chest. And he decided one day he wanted to enter a women's competition. This guy has won all kinds of men's competitions. So one day he goes into the women's weightlifting competition. He says, nope, I've decided that I'm a female now. And he applied, and the next thing you know, the rules committee doesn't know what to do with him, and they were all upset. It was hilarious. But I think that more people need to do this to show just how ridiculous these rules committees are and how agenda driven they are, because they are, as you said, this is the new misogyny. They're trying to put down women. And when they have an obvious man who doesn't care, doesn't give a rip about their ideologies and says, well, I'm going to apply according to your rules. And then they say, well, but you're not ideologically one of us.
I'm just saying, like, I think women, especially in the United States, ought to be taking note.
Yes.
Like they're trying to erase you.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically saying we're better women than you.
Yeah. Defeating women at being women. That's crazy.
And frankly, you know, you'll only ever be like kind of a sad man anyway, you know, if you did transition.
Right.
You just be a sad man, probably regretting, as many detransitioners are females, biological females who regret the procedures they've undergone.
Right.
That'll be you in a few years. So you're not even, you won't even be men.
Right.
You'll just be sad, you know, sissy boys, but we're better women than you. Like, we're just going to erase any kind of notion of what femininity is.
Right.
We're going to either exaggerate it, or like that Dylan Mulvaney, like acts like, you know, like
a 6-year-old girl.
A 6-year-old girl. Yeah. Like, well, please don't insult 6-year-old girls, you know?
Right.
But it's a very superficial definition of what a woman is.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a caricature.
Wait, they suddenly can define what a woman is.
Oh, now they know.
Now they know. It's
Apparently
somebody who wears high heels and goes hiking.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Hiking in heels.
Hiking in heels with like probably a dog in a purse.
Why don't they have hiking in heels events instead of Days of Vengeance?
Right?
You know,
well, but look, all those people you put up on that the Day of Vengeance, they all looked like females to me.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the women are catching on to the new misogyny, and the only way to become better men is to be more aggressive,
to have more power.
You know, remember I thought toxic males were a bad thing.
Oh yes, toxic masculinity.
Aren't they acting like toxic males? Like, shouldn't they be like condemned just for that?
They need to be canceled for this kind of thing because, you know, bad. So in regards to this and their behavior and their propaganda and everything else that's going on, there are also extreme hypocrites, because these are the same people that are saying, oh, that terrible event from January the 6th. They had this.
People almost died.
People died.
People did die.
Well,
but
yeah, but
really because of people going into the Capitol.
Ashley Babbitt comes to mind.
Yes.
She wasn't killed by protesters.
No.
She was killed by somebody else. But you know, so these people, they faint on their couches and they clutch their pearls because, oh, democracy dies when they storm the Capitol building. Oh, so what's this over here? This is
maybe that's a capital.
Oh yes, this is.
It's not the capital.
Well, it's the state capital of Kentucky, and here you go. This is. Look at this freak show over here.
Mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful. Of course, they're drowning everything out. You know, nobody can hear themselves.
The cops are like, I hate my job today.
Yes, they really hate their jobs today. So that happened. But there's more. There's also this event that took place. So what I showed you just there, that was March 2nd. This happened today. Okay. This happened today. Let me make sure that I'm sharing. Yep. Okay. So I'm sharing. I'm going to make this big so you can see. First I'm going to give you, so insurrection gets you how many years in prison and which gender prison? Glad to see the certain community coming out so strongly in support of terrorism. Okay, this is at the Tennessee State Capitol today.
No action, no peace! 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 No action, no peace!
These are lawmakers that really
no peace! No action, no peace! No action, no peace!
So that just goes on like that. But
No action, no peace. The
Mhm.
same week that, school children were horribly murdered.
Yep. So here we have protesters that have gotten to the front of the building. Okay. They're inside the chamber. All those politicians you can see are definitely cowering in fear. But here, these people got in. They started protesting loudly, which is verboten. They're not allowed to do that in the chamber.
They didn't look like they were being escorted.
I didn't see anybody being escorted out. Yeah, I didn't.
Like immediately.
I didn't see anybody getting arrested. I haven't seen any reports of anybody being arrested. So that happened today. Here's something else that happened today. Apparently, Satan showed up and decided that he was going to start protesting as well. So this is at the Kentucky State Capitol, where, okay, so it says that they were protesting
so all
these laws.
Yeah, all the Kentucky did was say children should not have surgeries.
Right.
If you're an adult and you want to go cut parts off, like go for it. But children, leave them alone. And so therefore, apparently, Satan needs to come.
Yep, Satan wearing what looks like a homemade chasuble is showing up at the assembly. So
also, I told you about this. I don't think I put a news article on it, but this past weekend, March 25th, the British personality, she goes by the name Posey Parker.
Oh, yeah.
She was invited to speak in New Zealand.
Right.
The event was called Let Women Speak as part of Women's History Month, whatever. So she goes, and she's a feminist. So she goes down. She couldn't even hold her speech because they had like 1,000+ activists of that type, dysphoric type, show up. They crowded in, overwhelmed the security. The security was muscling her out of there. Like, I mean, the pictures from it, like you can see the terror in her eyes. There were people talking about, like later on, about wanting her dead.
Wow.
They called her an Nazi turf. There were people saying, like, it made me feel so good watching her, like, in terror, leave this event. She was supposed to speak the next day, Sunday, somewhere else, but she'd already flown out of the country. And there were a bunch of these types of protesters who showed up, even though the talk was canceled. The New Zealand, some minister in New Zealand was like, I don't want her here. I find her views repugnant. Well, I guess, again, you tell people, hey, we're not going to do anything to you.
Right.
If you rise up and do whatever you want. I mean, they're not even going to escort them out of the chambers.
Yep.
Well, what do you think that's going to do to this movement except embolden them?
Well, and
keep going forward with threats.
So by way of analogy, I think what we actually have in this case is precisely what took place in the Roman arenas during the Christian persecution. They would put men, women, and children into the arena. The Senate and all the people of Rome would, or even in various Roman areas where they also had arenas, they would go and they would watch these events where Christians were escorted into the middle of the arena. And what would they do? They would starve wild animals and send them into the arena to eat these people. And if, by way of analogy, what we are seeing is that the ones who are in charge, the senators, the Roman representatives, whomever they are, the Roman governors, they are starving, in a certain respect, these animals. They are agitating them. They're getting them hungry to do something. And then at the right moment, they open up the gates where these defenseless people are gathered into the middle of the arena, and they're letting them being eaten and torn apart by these wild beasts. And that's where we are. And this is the point in salvation history, at least for this modern era, that we are in. We are in that particular aspect where that movement is being represented by these wild beasts. And They're being egged on by the crowd in order to tear us apart. That's what's happening. And we have to be vigilant about it. We're not going to be able to stop any kind of chastisement or punishment that God is going to send upon us. And a lot of times he allows evil to rise in order to remind us of our own sinfulness, our own failings, and our inability to stand up and be good, faithful Christians without Christ. You can't be Christian without Christ. So God's allowing us this kind of persecution. He's allowing us to go through this suffering so that we can stand up and be witnesses to Christ, to be witnesses, to be a true witness. And isn't that what the name martyr means, is to witness? And that's where we are. So that's all I got.
Well, that was abrupt. I guess if anybody who's a reader of the Epoch Times, they also did one. There was an article. Are we the new Byzantines?
Oh, interesting.
Citing the idea that the Byzantines lasted 1,000 years longer than Rome did,
right?
But ultimately fell because they neglected their walls. Building a wall, not building a wall. They neglected their walls that protected their city. They had gotten soft.
Yep.
Very effeminate in that respect. They stopped respecting their laws. Right. Remember Justinian's legal code, which he codified 500. They were still going strong on that for a long time, but they started just kind of like, about enforcing the law. What are we seeing in the United States today?
Right.
Laws that are, not for, for thee, but not for me.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing a lot of that, a kind of disrespect for law. Again, all those protesters in the state capitals. I thought after the events of last January 6th or whenever that was,
2 years ago,
that we were supposed to be horrified. I remember so many people on social media talking about how this, if you are in favor of this, like you are the most terrible thing ever that crawled out from under a rock. It's like, well, where are they now?
Holy virtue signal, Batman.
Yeah, well, where are they now? Virtue signaling about this clear attempts at intimidation of lawmakers, of Supreme Court justices, of anybody who doesn't agree with them, but specifically government people who are supposed to be protected, under the law. And if for intimidating them, the penalties are higher than if you were just intimidating like your neighbor.
Yep.
Where is the enforcement of the laws? We're disregarding the laws. We're disregarding our walls.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, 7 million illegals have poured across the borders and everybody's kind of shrugs about it. It's like, this is the kind of thing that was happening to the Byzantine Empire before the Ottomans
came in
and just smashed them all to bits. They were neglecting military training. I mean, there was another newspaper article that said some kind of statistic that most young Americans are unfit for military service. Too fat, too distracted, too whatever, too weak.
Yep.
And frankly, the military.
You remember the ad, the two ads that were juxtaposed a couple of years ago? You had the maybe it was last year.
I was going to say the military itself is so woke that they're not attracting any real soldiers.
Well, they had the American military ad, the woman, talking about how, she struggled through this and struggled through that.
And her two moms.
Yeah, her two moms, right? And then Russia.
It was an army ad.
It was an army ad. So Russia put out an ad showing all these buff guys running around doing really crazy stuff and showing that, we can definitely kill you three ways from Friday. So
I'm just saying, it's not going to take a whole lot to push over the sort of tottering American experiment.
Right.
We might still have some scary weapons, but in terms of infrastructure, I mean, remember this isn't, totally related, but the train derailments, we're seeing just our infrastructure, having issues.
Right.
We can't keep illegals out.
Right.
And now we're actively encouraging mentally ill people to be violent because we don't know how to say no. We don't even know how to enforce laws anymore.
Right.
Even just basic ones like don't come in and intimidate lawmakers in their place of, government session.
Right. Yep.
This is a big, that should be a big no-no.
Right.
there's a kind of hypocrisy. Now, one thing we didn't mention, but I think is worthwhile just because it's maybe a dangerous road to go down, is that what was it? Senator Josh Hawley wanted Biden to classify Monday's shooting as a hate crime.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think is dangerous.
I do too.
Because he wanted federal. His point was to kind of, again, show the hypocrisy of the federal government getting involved in cases like Mark Houck.
Yep.
Treating him like a domestic terrorist, or like parents at school board meetings.
Yep.
Merrick Garland offering the DOJ to help those school boards keep those terrorists in check, those parents. But crickets when it's their sacred cows. Total crickets. So that was his point. He was trying to show the hypocrisy, but I think it's dangerous.
Absolutely.
To use their terminology, because once we get the federal government involved, we're going to just lose control over everything.
Well, sure. And the thing is, once you start normalizing the idea of a hate crime, well, at what point does everything become a hate crime?
Right.
And
that kid stole a candy bar. Well, that's because the store owner was of that persuasion.
Right. And we have to understand that the whole purpose of hate crimes legislation was to federalize criminal activity. They wanted to make sure that they could bring federal courts and federal judges into these kinds of
penalties are higher.
The penalties are higher, but also a lot of times hate crimes require federal agents to go and investigate them. So now you've made it more a matter of the presidency, and you've made it a matter of the legislators on the federal level, who are, the Constitution says Congress shall make no laws. In other words, they're not supposed to be involved in
make
criminal
no laws. Well, and that was a direct reference to the First Amendment and things like that. Make no law prohibiting people's freedom. Obviously there are federal laws.
There are federal laws, but federal law is supposed to have to do with commerce. It's supposed to have to do with international.
Well, and as we know, it's the interpretation of things that has ballooned the federal monster so much over the years. How do we know when something is supposed to be handled locally?
Yep.
And when it's supposed to be handled federally? Again, Mark Houck.
Yep.
The local police were like, yeah, he shoved somebody.
Yeah.
The guy is pressing charges, but we don't have anything to charge him with.
Yep.
So then the federal government, because it's their sacred cow or their ideology they're trying to advance, they step in.
Yep.
But here, again, the hypocrisy that Hawley was trying to point out is you have this school shooting and he's saying, hey, federal government, where are you?
Yep.
Oh, no. That's local. Local handles that.
Right.
We're just here in a support capacity.
Yep.
It's like, that's hypocrisy.
It's an unequal application of law. It's an unequal application of force and power, but and we already know the reason why, because they want to weaken the right and they want to strengthen the left, and push us further and further into the system that they want to create, which is built on the idea of revolution. It's Marxism. It's pure, unadulterated Marxism.
Well, yeah. If you're constantly in a cycle of revolution, how can you have quote unquote normal life? You
can't.
How can you have people just raising kids, living, trying to do the right thing, work their jobs, put food on the table, etc. If every day there's chaos?
Right.
The only people who benefit from chaos are those who are, well, frankly, amoral and, strong enough to claw to the top.
Right. Or who foment it and know when and how it's going to be used.
Right. And then get rid of the people who, like Stalin.
Yep. So anyway, that'll wrap it up for this evening. And I hope you got something out of tonight's conversation. It was definitely pretty involved, going through all of the miserable things that are taking place in today's modern society. It's disheartening. It's upsetting. But the fact of the matter is, we have to remember that everything that we do and everything that we witness, we stand with and for Christ. We have to follow Our Lady as the guide who will draw us further to her Son. She'll show us how to get there. She'll show us how to get through it, but we have to be faithful. We have to be faithful in prayer. We have to be faithful in our ideologies and stick to the faith. When you have those moments of chaos and you have the tumult falling all around you, take a few moments, find a few moments. There were soldiers in wars who brought little pocket Bibles with them because they needed those moments of peace. And the only peace that they could find were those moments with Christ, with Our Lady. And
also just remember Christ going into Holy Week,
mhm.
when he faced his persecutors,
Yep.
he was silent.
Yeah.
Or he spoke, he spoke in a way where you could tell he was still trying to convert them.
Yes.
Like teaching Pilate about what
Mhm.
truth is,
Right.
and who I am and all that business. But Christ did not get angry, he didn't tear his hair out,
Right.
he didn't stomp the ground. He accepted that some things are the price
Yep.
of redemption, and so should we. Again, we have to live and act in the world, but we need to have Christ's peace in our hearts.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we will not, I don't think, survive
No.
the terrible things that are
No.
happening. We have to have Christ's peace in our hearts.
So I pray for Christ's peace in your hearts, especially as we enter Holy Week. I pray that you have a very blessed Holy Week, a very holy and blessed Easter. I wish all the graces upon you and your families. And with that, why don't we close with our 2 Hail Marys, one for our closing and then one also for my mother, the husband of my mother's cousin. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Our Lady of Victory.
Pray for us.
In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. God bless you all. We will not see you next week. We will see you the week after.